So what we're gonna do is there's 3 rooms in the house that have doors closed. We're gonna go into those rooms and we're going to talk to you a little bit about the objects in the room. 3 of you got an article about face jugs, 3 of you got an article about the heathen Chinese, and 3 of you got an article about Toussaint. You're going to be divided into those 3 groups, and then you're going to interpret those objects, since you already have background on them, inside the context that we're giving you. And then you're going to come up with an empowering label for those objects. So how do you read them against the context that they're presented in while making them stand out, making them the most important thing in the room?
We want this interpretation to really help someone understand why these objects matter, why these objects in fact can help us understand powerful stories, can help us access stories that might otherwise be hidden.
The object we have here is a pitcher made in the 1840s depicting Toussaint Louverture. The pitcher was made in Medford, Massachusetts, near Boston. Depicts an individual who was born into slavery in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti, and played an integral role throughout the revolutions that led to the abolition of slavery and then the Haiti's gaining independence from France right around 1800.
Who would have been the patron for the jug. It's believed that it would have been an abolitionist, someone who was dedicated to the cause of freeing the slaves prior to the Civil War. And the person who would have had this made would have used it almost as a kind of advertisement in their home. If someone came in, they could see that this was the kind of cause that they were behind. And the same person that would have had this in their home would have, some 60 or 70 years prior, had the cabinets behind us in their home as well. So the cabinets behind us are from New England, the 1760s, and they would have been made by slave labor.
In the same way that someone might want to signify their wealth, they might also want to signify that they're a moral person with this jug. So the economic term is conspicuous consumption, and then we also created our own version to say conspicuous morality, the moral cause being pro-abolition. But ultimately this picture is pretty racist. I mean, it's a decapitated head. It's an object someone owns and uses to serve themselves beverages. The facial features are based on stereotypes. It looks like a caricature to a modern audience. We don't think that it was intended as a caricature in a mocking way, but rather that it became one out of ignorance.
Objects like these, especially with relation to slavery, were often produced for meetings and conferences promoting these causes of abolishing slavery as ways to commemorate what they were talking about and what their cause was standing for. So this would have been one of those objects that really was created with a projective purpose to communicate. There are 4 of these known. Knowing how this was produced in a mold that could have been almost infinitely recast, that's a very small number, which could be reflective of discomfort with what this looked like.
So an object we compared it to was a Prius, a car that tells you that it has an agenda that's political and environmental. Priuses are more popular because they make you look like you care. And the same way, this makes you look like a moral person who cares about abolition and wants everyone to know it. I think it'd be very interesting to have conspicuously moral objects throughout time. So maybe like an explicit one to get the message across would be a political bumper sticker, and then less obvious ones like this jug, the Prius, lots of other similar things that could be used.
What we're looking at right now is a porcelain pitcher that depicts a scene from a famous poem in the late 19th century. It was written by a Californian editor, Hart, who wrote it as a satirical piece, and it was popularly known as the heathen Chinese. Hart actually was an advocate for Chinese immigrants and for their rights, and the poem was intended to reflect and make a commentary on the stereotypes of Chinese immigrants in California at the time. In the poem, 2 California white men, Bill Nye and Truthful James, actually tried to deceive a Chinese immigrant who they perceived to be as naive and childlike in a game of euchre, which is a card game. However, Austin actually wins and is winning these hands, and it becomes known that Austin actually was cheating, which was what Bill Nye and Truthful James had intended to do themselves, and they became irate, and Bill Nye actually attacked Austin. So the poem became taken literally and became a national and international kind of sensation. The author, while not pleased, still kind of condoned the poem becoming popular through other mediums such as a play and further reproductions and illustrations. The poem was kind of a pop culture element at the time, which became translated into this piece of barware, which was actually made by a high-end porcelain manufacturer in the years following the poem's original publication. It stylistically relates to almost every piece that's actually in this room, which is full of neoclassical works. It is made from a similar material. It's gold gilded with multicolors. It's very intricate with multiple themes.
This picture, it kind of epitomizes the theme of this room, not only in the sense of the decorative arts movement, but also as kind of a mediation between some of the more classical works in here and also some of the contemporary works. In terms of thinking about the kind of person who would purchase this and what this meant to them, it being two-sided, one showing an image that is controversial depending on your political beliefs, when the other side relates to the function of it being a beer pitcher, is more patriotic, provides an object that evokes a two-sided kind of conversation, attention to what side is being presented when it's being used.
Porcelain is an incredibly intentional material to work with. You don't just sort of plaster things onto a piece of porcelain willy-nilly. The messages that it portrays are also equally intentional. We have the avenues of exploring through the racial context of the poem of the heathen Chinese. We have the material itself, porcelain. We have the context of it being barware. This jug was actually very innovative in its design. The circular mouth and the sweet heart-shaped lip actually was an innovation in beer pouring. You can approach it from multiple avenues, and in that way, the jug is really a central piece in this room because really no object in here is safe from being connected to it. One of the things that is interesting to think about is the conditions of the consumerism of this particular object. We have no way really of knowing how it would have been interpreted by the people who bought it. Did they take it literally? Was it a sort of gag piece? Which side would have been displayed? Would it have been the more patriotic side depicting what we think of as Uncle Sam and the delivery of beer to America? Or would it have been this very tense scene over the game of euchre?
If jars could talk, look at me.
Our purpose is hidden in plain view. We reject you. We reject your superficiality, your wealth, your replication, your pretension. Does looking at me make you uncomfortable? We are present. We are made by hand. We are soul. We have life. I am in the room now.
Look at me.
Our purpose is hidden in plain view. Our purpose is hidden in plain view. We reject you. We reject your superficiality, your wealth, your replication, your pretension. Does looking at me make you uncomfortable? Does looking at me make you uncomfortable? We are present. We are made by hand. We are soul. We have life. I am in the room now.
As museum people and sort of art and culture and history people and all the different fields you come from, You guys have that inherent sense that objects in whatever format are meaningful and carry messages, but that's not something that's naturally and easily communicated to donors, to politicians, to community members, to sort of the wider scope of an institution. And so we're starting down the road of thinking about ways to make the museum more than a building full of old objects. And it's not to say that collections and objects don't matter, but it's sort of how you, to us, it's how you externalize the ideas that those objects are about that are interesting. Because that's what I think museums can do with objects, is use the objects to launch dialogues and help people understand, you know, however they come into it, that you can cross a lot of boundaries with those objects and with those discussions.
So what we're going to do is engage in an exercise where, in a sense, you guys are going to offer up some test cases of how to maybe rethink some of what goes on. We're not doing it we're not taking apart any dioramas or anything.
It's unfortunate. I was kind of hoping we'd have give you guys some hand tools.
And yesterday, we had the chance to engage with 3 different objects in our collection. A group of you were thinking about the Toussaint Louverture pitcher. A group of you were thinking about face jugs. And a group of you were thinking about our recent Heathen Chinese acquisition, the pitcher in the dining room. So today, instead of thinking about those objects in the context of chipstone, we are going to be thinking about those objects here in the Milwaukee Public Museum. So you are going to be exploring the museum with one of the mentors here today, and you are going to be imagining, where would I take this chipstone object and insert it into this museum, have an interpretation that is empowering for that object, that helps us understand that object in a deeper way, that focuses on that object and the important hidden stories that it's telling. You know, stories about race, stories about class, stories about region, stories about who's included and who's not included in museums. But you have to pick a place to put it that's going to highlight that story. You're going to pick a display, pick a gallery, pick one place here in this museum where you would like to insert that object. We are going to come back and actually put that object in that place and record what it looks like.
And think ambitiously. Yeah. I mean, think creatively.
And we'll let's do this.
Animal in the environment.
It's almost a little less creepy to me.
Yeah.
Because they're not behind glass. I don't know what it is. It like takes away that like curiosity cabinet kind of like element to it.
The trees look so real.
That's interesting to see the heads next to the photographs.
It is, yeah. So like the individual versus the type. Absolutely.
These are interesting because you really see the objects in their space. A recreated. Wow. Right, so every object in here has such a clear setting.
Right.
But I don't see any faces.
Right. Also interesting in the article we read, which talked about abolitionists who believed in returning African Americans to Africa. I don't know if we would want to return him here because I don't know how I feel about that. And we don't know where in Africa his ancestors would have come anyway. So these are also heads.
Yeah. Yeah, every time we walk by heads, we kind of stop and look at this. This is interesting. Where might we put the picture?
Yeah.
Because this is such a strong timeline of progress and improvement from the bottom to the top, going up the tree. It'd be tough to put it here, though, because you'd really have to interact with the way this timeline is ranked.
That's true. It'd be hard to look at him as more than just another example of a head in this context.
We're going to have a 2. Here to make boundaries. When I'm looking at objects like this.
You have an agenda.
Yeah, it really changes, yeah.
I think we should do it here because the impact is just so immediate with the words household headhunting and the visual in the middle of the 2 categories.
Mm-hmm. And the connection from head to head to head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Let's do it.
Really interesting because immediately we walked by the head hunting and see these detached, shrunken heads, which are really similar to seeing that picture on a table as almost a decapitated head.
The household items are right next to each other. Our jug is both. So the categories that are assigned to these objects, literally, if you ignore the giant space between them, read household headhunting, which is exactly what our object is in a different way.
So we're reading the heads as spoils, like a war trophy almost, and then mixed with the household object, the Toussaint head jar, if it was placed directly in between these, reads as both.
Right, it would speak to the large jug in the form of a woman over here that holds valuable food items, life-giving food items, and it would fit in with that important object in the ritual of eating and use. But then its symbolic, figural aspects connect to these heads that are from conquest, from domination, very political act. How political that picture was for anti-slavery movements, connecting these two messages in a kind of strange way, actually, to be connecting anti-slavery with headhunting.
Absolutely. Yeah, Westerners would see headhunting as strange to say the least, but here we're showing that Westerners do a similar thing in a very different way, and it has, the same conquest meaning.
They don't favor any certain part of the museum over the other, and everything seems to get as much attention and lighting as any other exhibit.
Yeah. Well, and all of the displays are well done.
Yeah.
Like they're all contextual types of display.
So Alice, you see this as more democratic than New York?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. That's a neat observation.
And also more accurate in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Or they actually have a much larger collection than in New York. And
Hey, a card game, just like in the Heathen Chinese.
I'm in Japan.
Cool.
I feel like this would be like our safe fallback.
But even though this is Japan and not China?
Well, let's keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got something.
I was gonna say, and also if you like it might. Oh, really? It's her thing. Yeah. Oh wow. This is China, right? Yes. I want to go to China. Pretty sure.
Any of these would be perfectly at home in an arts museum or things like that.
Well, it seems to abandon even just dividing it geographically without saying anthropological materials, ethnographic materials, historical materials. It kind of avoids that stigma by this geographic division. I mean, it creates other boundaries in that way, but it is nice.
Oh my god. Oh, we're never going to find a place for the object. I just want to spend all day in here.
I know.
Oh. So you don't think that like putting it in with Chinese wear would be provocative enough?
I'm not opposed to the idea. I just think that but I'd like to see if they have like a colonial interaction section or even like a Western section, because I think that a piece like that would really stand out as opposed to here it'd be kind of one of another type of piece. You know what I mean?
even though it's an American piece, but I feel like it doesn't make sense to bring it back to something older if it's older in a Chinese sense, because there's nothing about that object that is created from the hands of anyone who is
right.
Asian.
And it's about stereotypes, but this is more
exactly.
celebratory.
Exactly, why I thought it was provocative.
You've got time.
Yeah.
在瓷瓶的一侧，瓷浮雕处雕刻着异教徒中国人诗的一处场景，表现了一位从西方种族主义者对中国劳工们的敌对态度。这首诗的意象和陶瓷具象全是美国小说的创造， 但放在了中国的纯正的生活必需品内，描绘出了新的并列交错的文化启蒙。这种独特的安置形式是对创作者立场之于所描述者角度的拷问，这是在博物馆别的陈列里无法感受到的。The popular illustration of a scene from the heathen Chinese poem, sculpted in porcelain relief on one side of the picture, antagonizes the Chinese liberals from the perspective of a racist Westerner. The poem, the imagery, and the ceramic objects are all creations of American fiction. However, placed in the authentic setting of a Chinese living space, a new juxtaposition of cultural enlightenment is portrayed. This particular placement questions the position of the creator versus the perspective of the subject in a way that no other space in the museum would allow.
Do we want to make a case first for the Watson home and then to the Slovain home? It stimulates questioning to see it in place of the fruit jar, to ask, what is this object? What is the significance of this object? Juxtapose its craftsmanship, because you see the British ceramics, and then you see like the face jar.
There are so many other things that are like European influence. I'm worried that it's going to be seen as like some knick-knack.
Why is it in a more dominant place than the teapot? Like, why is it the most interesting and important object in the room is definitely a question versus hidden in a religious corner. But it would stimulate questioning, but I don't know if it stimulate the right sort of questioning that we want. Like, do we want people to be interested in what the object is, or do we just want to prove that the object is spiritually significant? If I didn't know what these jars were, I'd be like, oh, like the Sloven people, like, do they have these sort of face jars in their homes? Or if I put it in this, it leads you on a different path that may be more tied to what we want out of the placement of the jar.
And it ties into what we did yesterday. It has all the European china around the room, like it has on the table. And
That
the face jug in the center. Yeah.
I still feel like it needs to have the religious connotations with it because it's such an important part of what it is. And also, if you put it in the other home, like these jugs are hidden in plain sight from the Europeans.
Yeah, because I love the idea of finding the jar, like, whoa, like seeing it and being jarred and then questioning about it. But I think the question would be like, what is this religious item in the context of that religion, the context of these people in this house?
Yeah, they were an adaptation of like religious practices that were brought over by the slaves.
Yeah.
And they were made to be hidden, but like completely in plain sight.
Honestly, it would be really cool if we could place all four, because that's definitely something people would look for, and if they found more than one, like what are these things?
Go through the whole museum.
You put all four in.
Oh
yeah.
Fabulous.
We can place more of them?
Yeah.
Whatever we want.
Okay.
I think you want to pick one location.
Yeah.
No.
Well, unless.
We want it all down here and like
in this village.
Oh, so they invade different rooms.
Yes.
Okay.
We're not placing them on different floors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or do it that way. Just keep it somewhat contained like that.
Yeah. That's
Okay. Fine.
So we're going right here. This is the apothecary. Were you guys thinking in the display, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
kind of by the other jars, like really discreet.
Yeah, like this looks like a good place for it because it won't be like too dwarfed by everything else.
Or
but
here,
it'll be,
I was thinking. And
Yeah.
to move that bottle.
Yeah.
Bam. We decided on doing like the nicer one, the one that looks similar to the eyes blacked out, but that's the largest one too.
Yeah, I think we should also have it like staring directly out the window.
Directly out the window.
Like
Let's make it
just like staring you down.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And actually, the one with the blacked out eyes, because it has this placing a
or
curse
is
on
it a
somebody,
curse?
and like if the slave owners had like known that these people were making these conjure jars, they would have been really worried they were putting curses on them.
Right there in that corner. Is it big enough?
I think that's a little too hidden with the rocking chair in between the table and the piano, like.
Oh, okay, just
like
up against the wall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's way it's not under the piano. I just wanted to be somewhere that looks like it could be hidden, but like is actually visible for the people looking in.
Are you thinking, where are you thinking, like on the other end of the candle that makes it the cross still center?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah, because like I don't want to completely block the cross, but I do want it to be in that like center, very revered position.
So like here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially right there.
Cool. Wow.
And
we got so decisive so fast.
I know, but that's because we figured out we could have
4.
all of them. I think with all the places we've chosen, we have a pretty nice narrative of what these jars are for.
And I think we get into like the spirituality, the functionality, the craftsmanship, the importance, the use, the discussion. We get into a lot, which is good.
And it's nice that we have all of these that we can connect together in different like areas of this exhibit, so it's not just we have to tell one aspect of the story, we can tell more.
It almost is a find the face jar.
Yeah.
It goes with our poem that we did.
Yeah.
It really does. To think that's been useful.
This is not a clock. This is a family member. It has a name, grandmother or grandfather. It has a brain with gears that move and work. It has a heart that keeps time deep in its chest. It has feet that allow it to stand. It has a face which we may gaze upon. It has hands that gesture. It has a voice, a sound that speaks to us. It is a physical presence in our homes, participating in our domestic rituals. It watches us grow. This is not a clock. This is a family member.
This is not a clock. This is a ruler. It has an ornate crown atop its head, like a monarch. It is housed in a decorative palace with brass ornamentation, carved designs throughout its body, and classical elements, columns framing its entrance, mounts supporting its crown. It dictates out to us, its subjects, from its palace. We set our lives by the clock. We know when to have tea when it chimes a certain time. We do not rule it, it rules us. This is not a clock, this is a ruler.
This is not a clock. This is a universe. The instrument inside the clock tracks seconds, minutes, and days, displaying them on its face of concentric and layered circles. Think about celestial charts and the orbits of planets. Near the top, we see a lunar cycle and the 2 hemispheres of the Earth. Notice, though, that the numbers that encircle the hands are all directed towards the center. The clock does not address us, standing upright in front of it, but directs itself to its own center. It is autonomous, whole. This is not a clock. This is a universe.
This is not a chest. This is a contract. It was given to Elizabeth George in 1779 by Abraham Markham. She was 17 and he was 25. They had a 6-year promise before their wedding until 1785.
This is not a chest, this is a contract. When this chest arrived at Elizabeth's house, she would have been granted the key to it. She would have had complete autonomy to open the chest and put linens and blankets inside of it in preparation for her marriage household.
This is not a chest, it's a contract. However, this chest is not only a sign of Elizabeth's obligation, but also a symbol of hope for the future. The central image on the front is of 2 kissing squirrels resting on a heart, an image of love. The circular images are mirror images of each other, forming 2 halves of a whole. While they may seem decorative, they are also symbols of the life Elizabeth and Abraham will have together when they marry. The images evoke hopes for a fruitful future, their flowering love producing children and continued fertility. Abraham seals this promise with the signing of his name over the medallions.
This is not a fire screen. This is a canvas.
Fire screens were typically used to block the heat from fireplaces so that a lady sitting in front of the fire could be warm without turning red, in a time where it was fashionable to look as pale as porcelain. Women would need to sit by the fireplace as a light source for needlework. The hearth was a family gathering place, and a woman would often find herself in front of the light and the heat. Wealthy families commissioned master woodworkers to construct household furniture, including adjustable fire screens. The needlework stretched in the frame, however, was often created by the lady of the house. This showcased her skill and patience to all that visited the estate.
So why a canvas?
Well, not a literal canvas, but an imaginary space to create, an outlet in which a woman could pose herself to her advantage. In a similar way, an artist would use a framing device to compose a portrait. This elevated a woman's needlework to the status of a master painter. Because she did the needlework, she is both the artist and the model.